Hello, and welcome to Dr. Neurosaurus. Today's Paleo Spotlight is Dr. Aly Baumgartner, Collection Manager of Vascular Plants at University of Michigan's Herbarium. Her career in paleontology started with a love of mammoths, and her curiosity about the ancient world led her to study fossil plants. Today, she guards and organizes the plant collection at the herbarium and helps scientists find specimens to answer their research questions. Find out how she jumped from mammoths to plants, how plants are preserved for study, and more on today's episode. Aly, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for talking to me.
Thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
I'm very
So
excited.
you're a collections manager of vascular plants.
Correct.
What does that mean?
That is a great question. If I give you a silly, overly simplistic answer, it means I'm not in charge of mosses. To give you a better answer, it means that I am responsible. I am the plant librarian for ferns, gymnosperms, and angiosperms, and I dabble a little bit in algae. We're not going to think about how that doesn't actually fit under vascular plants. It's fine.
Yeah, it's quite the spread.
Yes.
So
Yes.
everything that is green or greenish
Yes.
minus moss.
Yes.
And what goes into caring for those collections?
Oh goodness. I love this question because I have a kind of silly answer. So there are four parts of my job. So manual labor, arguing with robots, judging the choices of people in the past, and lamenting the budget. Uh,
Let's unpack that.
yes. So what I mean
Let's
by
go in
that,
order.
yeah. So manual labor is exactly what it sounds like. I have to move things. I have to physically like move things from point A to point B. I have to unbox things. I have to box up things. Manual labor. I used to work as a vertebrate paleontology collection manager in multiple different paleontology collections that had much more manual parts to the labor. Because I was lifting rocks essentially, and like the press plants are way lighter and it's great. So that's the first part. Arguing with robots is a lot of what we do is working with databases, online databases, or digitizing material. And sometimes the database just says no, or the computer is acting up, or the camera is acting up. And so I am the one who has to figure out the answer to that. Judging the choices of people in the past. So our job as collection managers is to make things findable and to make them last forever. And sometimes people in the past did things that make either one of those things a little bit more difficult than it should be. So sometimes it means coming across a fossil that has like masking tape on it. Sometimes it is someone had really bad handwriting and you're trying to figure out what things say. And then lamenting the budget, I think, is very obvious. Museums in general and libraries are underfunded. So we have to do as much as we can with very little. And so we get very creative. Yeah.
Finding those little notes in the collections that
Mm-hmm.
people have looked at the original notes from the person who classified the thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then someone has come by and looked at that and re-looked at the fossil and said, no, that's
Mm-hmm.
not this at all. And those little handwritten notes that you stumble upon, and
Yes.
sometimes it's people you don't know, and sometimes it's people you know but didn't
Mm-hmm.
know that they had come to the collection at
Yes.
any given point. It's so much fun. You see the whole history
Yes.
of
Well,
everything in like one.
yeah. And it's fascinating too because so I started in paleontology where the notes are like sometimes just scraps of paper stuffed in boxes. And so it's like archaeology on top of the paleontology because you are like going through people's trash that they left behind.
Yes.
But in a herbarium, it's actually like way more organized than that. So you have the herbarium sheet, and there is a system for how you leave notes. So people will like you write directly on the sheet, or you put a new determination tag on it. And so yeah, you'll see basically these like conversations back and forth between people. Um, And sometimes people will write out sentences and be like, this is clearly not XYZ, or just my favorite is no exclamation point. Uh, I've seen that one a lot. Yeah, and it is so fun because again, you get this little history. We actually in our library here have books of handwriting. And it's just like notes and letters, whatever, taken from people who have a connection to the herbarium, that are stored so that if we do ever come across a note that we can't recognize the handwriting, we can go back and look at the handwriting book to get a sense of like, could it possibly be this person? And it's actually really helpful because as one of the emeritus curators says, most of the people who would recognize the handwriting, seeing it, are at the Great Museum in the Sky, and so we have to use other methods to make sure we don't lose this information.
And handwriting has changed so much in the
Yes.
last 200 years. And if you think
Yes.
about the duration of some of these collections when they were originally collected, the original
Yes.
handwritten notes that came with
Yes.
them,
Yes.
people were writing only in cursive, which,
Oh,
we all sort of learned cursive,
yes.
but when
Well,
you
we
look
did.
at yeah, when you look at cursive from like 1860,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost impenetrable.
Yeah, so the way that we digitize our material is we will image it and then we transcribe it from the image because every herbarium sheet, you can actually see the wait, picture behind me. There we go. That's herbarium sheet. So that box in the corner. There we go. This is very hard. The box in the corner is the information. And so we will transcribe the information in there. And it's great when they're recent because they're like typed up and it's great. Our some of our oldest material is from the early 1800s. And so that is like the loopiest of handwriting. And a good chunk of our stuff is from Europe. So sometimes you have the added bonus of not in English. Um, and just like there are regional differences in handwriting. Um, so you can actually, like, if you do enough of this transcription, you can actually recognize, like, oh, that person is French or that person is German based on the shape of their cursive.
What's your favorite part of your job?
The fact that every day is different. I get the combination of every day is different, and I get to look at so many different plants. Because it's something I learned about myself in grad school. Like I really liked the variability that I had no idea. Like any day could be different, right? I might be teaching all one day or might be looking at specimens all one day. And it's very fun. And I get to see so many different things because it is my responsibility to know what we have and where it is. So it is my job to just start opening cabinets and seeing what's inside there, just in case it needs help or someone might be interested in the future.
So you're working with modern plants,
Correct.
but you're coming from a paleo background.
Correct.
Can you can you tell us about your trajectory and where you
Yeah,
started and how you ended up
yeah.
here?
Yes. So I originally, so when I was in first grade, I wrote an all about me book and it said, when I grow up, I want to be a paleontologist. Like there was never anything else I wanted to do. And so when I went to like up until when I went like through college, I wanted to be a vertebrate paleontologist. I wanted to study mammoths. Like proboscideans were my baby. I loved them. I did an internship at the mammoth site in Hot Springs, South Dakota. Like never any doubt. And then I applied to grad school and I got accepted to grad school. And when I was given my project for my master's, I was told, okay, so you're going to be working on fossil plants. And I was like, okay, that's not so bad. Like I've always liked plants. I had taken like multiple botany classes. But it's fine. Masters, it's only 2 years. Like, it's fine. And then I realized that all of the things I was actually interested in in paleontology were best answered with plants because it was the ecology and the climate questions. And really, some of the best ways to get at that is with plants. And I have always liked plants. So it's like, okay, never mind. I like this. And then when I started doing my PhD, like that was straight up paleobotany, no doubt about it. And I realized, yes, no, I actually love this. And I call myself an applied paleobotanist So I study modern plants and then apply that information to fossils because we're making a whole lot of assumptions with the fossils, but it's good sometimes to just make sure these things are true. But like in undergrad, I took invert paleo classes and I taught invert paleo in my PhD. So when it got to finishing my PhD and figuring out what on earth I was going to do with my life, I was like, well, obviously I want to be a collections manager. Obviously, like what else would I want to do? And so my first job out of grad school was as a paleontology collections manager. So I was in charge of vertebrate, invertebrate, paleontology, paleobotany, and geology. Yeah, it
Well,
was
that's a lot. That's a
it
broad
was. It was a
coverage.
lot. And I had experience in all of those things because my PhD was in geology. So I had taught geology classes. I had taught paleo invert paleo classes. I was a paleobotanist and I had done multiple internships in invert paleo. So like I could actually do all of those things, but let me tell you, that was a whole lot. It was hard mode because like one, it's so many different fortunately none of the largest collection was 20,000 things, which is relatively small. It's relatively small. It's still a lot. There were less than 25,000 things in the entire collection that I was in charge of. But like the needs are very different. Like the needs of marine invertebrates versus, Pleistocene proboscideans are fundamentally different. And so it was a lot. I was constantly shifting gears. And then I'm originally from Michigan. And so when the opportunity to come back to Michigan and work with plants, which is where I started, was something I really wanted to do.
So you mentioned a bunch of different things that I'm going to just
Yeah,
touch back on.
love
So
it.
one is how you shifted from vertebrate paleontology
Hmm.
to understanding that the questions that you wanted to answer
Hmm.
were better answered by using plant models
Yes.
instead of vertebrate models. And that's really interesting. I
Hmm.
think there's a big assumption about paleontology in general and paleobotany that we go out and all we do is just find new things, but
Yes.
sometimes like we have questions that we want to answer about
Yes.
general evolution, and it's really interesting that you switched models not from one vertebrate to a different group but
Hmm.
just entirely
Yep.
to a different part
Different
of the tree.
kingdom.
Yeah. um Also, I also look at modern things
Hmm.
to test ideas about paleo.
Yeah.
Mine is bird brain related to dinosaur evolution,
Hmm.
so it's fun seeing the analogous
Yeah.
situation
It's
for
what the cool
plants.
kids are doing.
Yeah, well, the cool kids
Yeah.
testing old ideas with new
Yes.
technology and new specimens.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we've said it for a long time, but like, do we know that?
What what do we know really
Yes.
when it
Right.
comes to
Exactly.
brains and plants?
Yes.
When you're caring for these plants,
Hmm.
I'm very familiar with looking at vertebrate paleontology collections. You open
Yeah.
a big cabinet, there's
Yes.
rocky body parts,
Yes.
stegosaurus plates, bones, etc. What does it look like when you open cabinets?
It's way more like an archive or a library because the way that these, okay, really quick, explaining how plants get to the point where they're in a herbarium. So you go out in the field and you collect them. That's great. How exciting. Document it. And then you press it between often newspaper, and then you put it in a plant press, and it's fundamentally the same thing as like putting a leaf between pages of a book, right? So we put them in a plant press to press them, make them flat, and then we'll put them in a dryer to dry them out, get all the moisture out, and then we glue it to a piece of archival paper, and we put the little label on it, and then we store those sheets in folders and those folders in cabinets. So when you open up a cabinet, can I reach the one behind me? It's just full of cubbies. And within the cubbies, you'll have stacks of different things. All those drop tags are reminding me like what I need to do with each thing. Um, but yeah, it's just basically it's like a library because like we're dealing with basically pages of a book, and the earliest herbarium sheets were actually bound as books. So it means that we can really like we can get really compact. Like this stuff can be really, really dense. If you're dealing with sheets that are like woody, they'll be a little bit thicker. You can fit fewer things in there. If you're dealing with like a grass, that's super flat, and so you can really fill up those cubbies. So yeah, we have just thousands. We have almost 2,000 cabinets in the herbarium. Um, each one full of, I think, like 24, 26 cubbies. We used to, before we moved to this facility, we actually had compactors. So same thing, but compact shelving. We no longer have them because we moved buildings and boring logistical reasons. Um, but yeah, basically, I'm a plant librarian.
We all love librarians.
Yeah.
So, um, couple of questions on that.
Yes.
Glue
Yeah.
when you glue the plants onto archival paper, doesn't the
Yes.
glue affect how, like, the preservation of the plant?
So one, they're dried out, so there's less to like interact with. And two, we are using archival glues to make sure that they are not going to be reactive. But also three, not everything is glued to the sheet. So there isn't one in the picture behind me, but oftentimes there will be a fragment packet. So there'll be basically a little pocket, a little packet attached to it. And we will put a couple of, like if any fruits fell off, if any leaves fell out, we'll put them in there. That's also really good for if you're doing like genetic analysis, DNA, if you need tissue for DNA, it's really nice to be able to pull it from the packet because that way it hasn't been glued. Because one, it's really hard to take off if it's been glued, and two, there's other things with it. We currently glue things. That has not always been the case. So when you are mounting plants, which is kind of an art, it is not a skill that I currently possess. You use a combination of glue and like paper tabs and actual sewing. So yeah. So if you have like a pine cone, and you're going to attach it to the sheet, you would actually sew through the paper and have the thread go over the pine cone and attach it that way. Because if you're gluing it, no, you're not. Like that's gonna come off. So doing it that way is a way that you can make sure it's attached. Historically, the way we would attach things was much looser. So we would tab them down with little like paper tabs, like glue and paper tabs, or we would sew them. Now we lean much more like that is stuck there with glue. And who knows if this is what we will continue doing in the future, because like you can get a sense of when things were mounted based on how they're mounted. And some people are way better at it than others. Yeah, because now a lot of people are requesting material for DNA analysis and having it, if it's glued down, they can't, which is kind of a problem.
There's so much to this that I
Mhm.
have never considered.
Yes.
Wow.
Many people, like most people, I would say, don't really pay any attention to the plants around them. Like I joke in, especially in paleo context, like I am the context because plants are not just the green background. Like they are like biomes are literally named for the plants that are in them. Plants are also important. Plants also exist, and like are alive. Like that's the thing. A lot of people don't even think of plants as alive, because they are alive in such a different way that animals are. The fact that they don't move, they're not well, most of them aren't eating things. Um, like it's not how we are used to. So like it's very easy to think of like a mouse as alive, a bird as alive, but a plant, like it's just sitting there being green. So yeah, plants exist. Plants are wonderful. Love the plants.
And pay attention to them. They tell
Yes.
fascinating stories.
Yes.
Aly, thank you for spending so much time with us talking about the importance of plants and science communication and your job as a collections manager. This has all been phenomenal.
This has been so much fun. Thank you for letting me speak for the trees, fossil and otherwise. This has been very, very fun.
That's it for this one, and we'll see you in the next video.